Good evening, America. This is Stitch, and you're watching Real Talk TV. Last week we left off talking about corrupt capitalists and greedy rich people. Uh, like I said last week, I haven't looked into the politicians yet. I'm going to save that for during the primary elections because that's when they're going to be getting up on stage and basically putting their foot in their mouth and making fools of themselves. And we're going to be able to have a lot of fun with that. Plus, we're going to learn about the candidates. But when I started doing the research for the show on corruption, the first people that came to my mind, of course, were the Koch brothers. I thought they'd be on the top of the list for sure, but I guess there's always somebody worse. Let me read some of this to you. Florida attorney Steve Medina has been working on a case pro bono to expose the environmental corruption which has been taking place in Tallahassee and Putnam County in Florida. Tons of toxic waste is being dumped into the St. Johns River daily by the Koch brothers company Georgia Pacific. Aspects of the deal allowing Georgia Pacific to massively assault the environment were misleading, sometimes illegal, and unbeknownst to the local citizens. Florida Governor Rick Scott and former governor and Republican presidential hopeful Jeb Bush are also involved. Like I said, I wasn't looking for these politicians at this time. I was looking in on the Koch brothers, but here they are. You probably don't know that, especially if you're not from Florida. I've been living here for 10 years, and I had no idea that this was going on. I liked Jeb Bush to an extent until he started talking. He's just another Bush now. But thanks to Governor Scott, a veritable fountainhead of toxic waste has been directly dumped every day into the heart of Florida's American Heritage River, the St. Johns. As discussed below in this article, it is released through what is contended in a legal action to be an illegally approved pipeline, the circumstances of which Governor Scott, as the current chairperson of Florida's trustees of the Internal Improvement Trust Fund, refuses to investigate. Now, to investigate these circumstances would be to investigate highly questionable actions of yet another state agency, the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. These actions in turn reach back into the Jeb Bush administration from 1999 to 2007, when then Governor Bush and the Florida cabinet, over the objections of then Attorney General Charlie Crist, who lost to Governor Scott in the governor's election, you may remember, they gave a preliminary approval for Georgia Pacific pipeline from its Palatka paper mill to the St. Johns River. So tons of toxic waste travel through the pipe to the heart of the St. Johns River every day. The approval was finalized through what Florida citizens and environmental groups are calling a grossly misleading newspaper public notice that aimed to cut off public challenges to the pipeline easement, which the trustees agent, the FDEP, eventually granted. Now, ironically, or maybe not, the benefactors of the spewing are Charles and David Koch, the foremost, or at least two of the richest purveyors of freedom, supposedly. Since late 2005, Koch Industries has owned Georgia Pacific. It began buying up Georgia Pacific assets the year before. The Koch brothers have since been active in educating Georgia Pacific employees about the right way to vote. If you want to keep your job, this is the way you vote. Now, this is the same pair of billionaires who have taken an interest of late into shaping the minds of Florida State University students. There's a story about that on www.dailycost.com if you want to read that. Students are presumably going to be encouraged to learn such definitions as freedom, defined as to ask nothing, expect nothing, and depend on nothing. That's pretty much the Koch brothers' the way of handling our students. This is all we need to know. In 2003, Governor Jeb Bush and the cabinet, with the lone dissenter Charlie Crist, voted, after the most cursory of consideration of the impacts to the river, to give what the FDEP concedes was the only preliminary approval of a private easement into the river for the Georgia Pacific Pipeline. It was only a preliminary approval. It wasn't ever finalized. Importantly then, to construct and use the pipeline would require not only an FDEP wetlands permit and an FDEP water pollution permit, but also the finalization of the preliminary approval given by the governor and cabinet for issuance of the pipeline easement. In 2005, FDEP, acting as agent for the trustees, under mysterious circumstances, buried this trustee's finalization inside an FDEP notice of intent to issue permit, which was the wetlands permit, or the ERP. This grossly misleading and thereby apparently constitutionally defective notice, published by the Georgia Pacific Corp in the Palatka Daily News. Why do we have such weird names here in Florida? Excuse me. Anyways, the notice that they published in the news did not give reasonable Floridians who might have happened to glance at that paper's legal ads that day open and fair warning that the notice was about not only the wetlands permit, but also about the easement. This is a due process problem. Now, we all know that the Koch brothers are two of the biggest donors to the GOP campaigns. They buy a guy in each race for the primaries, and if he doesn't win, they buy a new horse for the final race. That's no surprise. I was a little surprised to see Jeb Bush with the Kochs. I thought he could be his own as man with the $1 billion super PAC funding that he has backing his campaign. But turns out he's just another Bush. So I've given you examples of the corruption that's going on up at the top. I mean, this is just scratching the surface, of course. We could go on for weeks talking about the corruption up at the top. But, you know, what can we do about it? First, we've got to learn about the candidates, who they're aligned with and why, and what do they have to gain from their policies, and more important, what do you stand to gain or lose? Now, that's something that we don't do a lot of anymore as citizens. We've picked our parties and we vote with them faithfully. I know a lot of people who vote for a particular party, Democrat or Republican, because that's the way my family has always voted. Well, it's not working out that way for us anymore because the parties have switched, and we're going to talk about that later. But we can change policy, and we can put people into government that will do the job the way we want it to be done. We know we have the power because we just made history again by legalizing gay marriage across the country. And the Supreme Court also upheld the Affordable Care Act, yet many candidates vow to strike it down if elected. Just as I said last week that most Americans don't dislike minorities, we also don't care if gays get a legal marriage certificate. Nobody is asking you to do it at your church, and it's a legal ceremony, not a religious one. Marriage vows are not in the Bible. You better, you wetter. That's the way it works in the Bible. The thing that became legal was for them to have legal rights, not religious rights, and discriminating against them is no different than any other discrimination. So if you're a Christian, then follow the lead of your Pope, who said it is not for me to judge, but for God alone to judge. I am just a man. I love this Pope. First Pope I've ever cared to hear anything from. So why will we keep electing people into office who refuse to carry out the will of the people? Here in Florida, Rick Scott and Pam Bondi fight every piece of legislation we approve, and they don't even cooperate with the other Republicans in the State House and Senate. His party doesn't like him, but between the Koch brothers and his own $200 million, he got 21% of Florida registered voters to vote for him, and he won the election with 21%. His opponent only got 20%. How does that work? The other 60% stayed home because they didn't care about either candidate, and it wasn't a presidential election. We either need to eliminate midterm elections and have all elections at the same time, or find a way to get more voters to midterm elections. Having a midterm election with only 40% of registered voters showing up to the polls is not giving you a true majority vote, and it's really destroying uh, a lot of our state governments. You know, we can't get past the state government level to get anything done. How are we going to do it at a federal level? So if we don't participate, we can't make any change. Eventually, we'll be able to vote online. And I think the sooner they figure that out, the better. I don't see it being any easier to commit fraud than losing an entire ballot box. And there won't be any hanging chads. So people who do not have computers can still go vote the old way. But if we could do our ballot at home at our convenience, more people would vote. That's just bottom line. American Idol got more votes than most of our elections get. And we need to take the money out of the elections. That's another thing. And the lobbying. Each candidate should get an equal amount of airtime on all networks. Those networks who refuse to air any candidates or all the candidates lose their press pass to the White House. You know, that's not a right. That's a privilege. There should be a series of debates where all candidates must be allowed to attend, if not required to attend. By doing this, we can break the two-party system, and someone in the middle who is conservative in some ways and liberal in others can have a chance to get into office. How is being the governor worth spending $200 million of your own money unless you have a plan to recoup that investment? I think we could do a lot better for ourselves if we make some changes in the election process that make your ideas more important than your wallet. Uh, let's stop electing people that are not getting the job done. That way, not getting the job done or not getting the job done the way we want it done. Maybe term limits for Congress and Senate would be a good idea. How do we do that? We force the issue on a ballot through a petition drive, just like the legal marijuana initiative, the gay marriage initiative, everything else that we, as a people, have put on the ballots. It's been done through petition drives. That's how we get things done as a people. The first one I would go after is the requirements to get an issue on the ballot. They need to be made more reasonable so it doesn't cost millions of dollars to get it done. Right now, there are millions of dollars being spent on petition drives to get ballots put on the 2016 proposal. It shouldn't cost us millions of dollars. Yes, it should require a certain amount of signatures. They need to expand the amount of time that you have to gather the signatures and make online signatures valid. You shouldn't have to pay people to go out and get signatures for you. And we also shouldn't need a 60% majority to pass a proposal and only 51% to elect a president. I think state and federal budgets should require our approval. Have you ever read one of our budgets? I've read our state budget, and it's sickening to see the things that they have cut out of the budget. Again this year, another $9 million was denied to help the homeless. Millions were denied to the VA fund. I haven't read this year's budget, but I'm gonna do a report on it. And I would like those of you in other states to take the time to glance over your state's budget and look at some of the ridiculous things that got cut and the more ridiculous things that didn't get cut. The last one I read, it cut $2.5 million out of the VA. It cut $1.5 million for Metropolitan Ministries to build more beds for the homeless, and it approved $5 million to build a rowing academy. Now, who the hell needs a rowing academy? Nobody. But if they'd have taken that $5 million, they could have funded both those other projects and had money left over for something else. It's just ridiculous. Every year they veto funding. I said they vetoed funding for the VA and the homeless. This year they vetoed $9 million for the homeless, and they waste money on their pet projects. Now, when we get a politician that ends up being disliked by everyone, we can have them removed. Right now, Rick the Dick Scott is the most disliked politician of all times. I'm pretty sure he has surpassed George Bush at his worst and Obama at his worst for approval ratings. I don't know of anybody that approves of Rick Scott. So why isn't there a recall vote? Why are we just going to let him sit there for another 4 years? We need to get on the ball. You know, where are the activists that, if he tried to regulate guns, the NRA would have Mountain a week. But since he's for the NRA and for anybody else that's got big money, nobody's going to touch this guy. I don't know if I mentioned this before. 2 senators from Colorado voted on gun regulation because more than 80% of the people there wanted it. After the vote, the NRA petitioned for the recall of both senators, and the people who wanted the gun control didn't show up in their favor. Why? Because they weren't as passionate in their beliefs and the NRA had the money and the numbers to get the petition done. We can do the same thing with any elected official we don't like. We just have to get off the couch and do something. Once we, the people, start standing up to our government and getting the laws changed so they make sense for us, we can begin to rebuild our great country. We're going to stick with the theme of corruption. I'm going to look up more cases like the Wall Street bailout and why nobody is in jail over the mortgage scandal. We will eventually talk about companies like Burger King who have moved their headquarters to Canada to avoid taxes. There should be penalties and repercussions for that. We'll talk about the Apple factory in China. And we'll also start taking a closer look at the people running for president or other offices. I mentioned Governor Rick the Dick Scott and how much he paid to win the last election. Well, I think he plans to run for another office, and he must be stopped. He went from being convicted of insurance fraud when he worked for the hospitals and had to pay a $2 billion fine, and now he's the governor. It's ridiculous. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this. But we'll be back in just a minute.
Alright, so I'm just going to do about Sarah Palin because every time they talk about her, she pisses me off. Matter of fact, they got several more articles about her down here. I'm sure I can find another 100 more reasons to bitch about her. But really, man, if the NRA does expect to be respected, why would they even have Sarah Palin come speak at one of their conventions? I mean, it's completely and utterly embarrassing.
Welcome to the Bounty Hunt.
All right. Well, now we've been talking about these corporate corruption folks, and I make a lot of fun of the right-wing conservative Christian Republicans, but let's not forget, about our other friends. The liberals are just as bad, and here's one that tops the list. I think everybody in the country makes fun of this guy nowadays, Al Sharpton. If there's a racist issue going on anywhere, if some poor black kid's been killed and there's a camera around, Al Sharpton will be there. Jesse Jackson used to show up too, but he finally got embarrassed by his own bullshit and It doesn't show up a lot now, but Al's still out there making money. And Al Sharpton owes the IRS $41 million. Why isn't he in prison? He had to make more than 100 million in order to owe 41 in taxes. Pay your taxes, you greedy rich ass. There's no excuse for that. Now, this is a guy that's supposed to be a good Christian, marched with Martin Luther King, for our civil rights. At some point, he was considered a good reverend, and now he's just a money monger. There's nothing good about this guy anymore. What comes out of his mouth is bull crap. The fact that he's making so much money being a reverend goes against everything I read in the Bible about the humble priest, and they're not supposed to be rich people. They're supposed to give their money away to the poor and just have enough money to live on. So what happened to the humility and humble in the church? It just doesn't work for me. I don't like that. We're going to continue this topic throughout the election. And I hope you guys will post topics or companies that you'd like to add to this list. Like I said, I can research this and we could go on for weeks. But if there's companies that you know about that you want to talk about, bring it up, post it on our site, and I'll research it and we'll talk about it. If you want to be on the show, let me know, and we'll give you a call and we'll set it up and we'll get you on the show. Next week, I hope to have a guest. His name's Idle, and we're going to be talking more about fraud. We talked about these rich people and how they got away with fraud. And next week, we're going to talk about how you get treated in a fraud case if you're not a millionaire. There have been people that have been, in some cases, wrongly convicted of fraud because of something that happened in their company. This is the case that we're going to talk about next week. I'm not going to try and get into the details. I don't know the details. I've heard the story. It's a very compelling story. It's not the first time I've heard this type of story. Hopefully we're going to get some conversation going about it. And I think it's very important. People who do go into business and don't take care of their own books leave themselves wide open for a lot of bad things to happen. So if you own a business, you got to know what's going on with your books. You got to know you can't assume you can trust your employees because every one of them has the opportunity to do you in. Now, we had a company back in Michigan years ago, and we had a secretary. I'm not going to say her name. None of you probably know her. Well, I take that back. Shirley knows her. But anyways, we had a secretary that was stealing from us, and she was taking invoices and stuffing them between the files and taking the money. And she was also paying for her daughter's health insurance through our company. And we lost thousands of dollars to that theft. She didn't put us into bankruptcy or get us in legal trouble, thank God. We caught her before it got that bad. And then she turned around and tried to get us in trouble with the IRS, claiming that we didn't pay all our taxes because she had stolen some of the money, so we couldn't possibly pay the taxes on it, right? So we had our books investigated for 7 years, and of course we never did violate taxes. We always paid our taxes. Like I said before, I'm proud to pay taxes. I was proud to pay taxes when I paid taxes. I was proud that I made enough to owe those taxes. And as much as I could have used that extra money in my pocket, I did not begrudge the government my tax money. The government needs the money to do the work, and there are poorer people out there that need the money more than I did. Now, you'll hear me complaining a lot about greedy rich people on probably every show. I don't know. It's one of my really big pet peeves. I don't mind rich people. I have nothing against you being rich and wealthy, but if you're rich and wealthy, then you should have some compassion towards those who aren't, and you should be looking for ways to benefit your community. And if you're not doing that, then you're a greedy, rich asshole, and I'll probably have something to say about you at some point on the show. None of you that I've invited to the show are in that category, obviously, as none of you are in that income level. So, plus, I know every one of you has given and done things in your community. So, obviously, you people, my friends, my audience, doesn't fit that list. But we're going to talk some serious shit about those who do fit that list. Again, I have a guest coming on next week. We're going to talk about more fraud. We're going to talk about more fraud in government. I'm going to lay off of corporations for a minute. I'm going to do my research on who the biggest frauds in our government are. I was very disappointed to read about some of these frauds happening under the Clinton administration and Reagan administration, two presidents I have a lot of respect for. It really bums me out that these type of things happened on their watch. I also wasn't aware until I did the research for this show that the Democratic Party has done a big turnaround, like just as I said the Republicans have. Neither one is the party they were 50 to 100 years ago. So if we're voting Democrat or Republican because their families have always voted Democrat or Republican, then we really need to do some research and look at what we're voting for, because I don't think we really believe in what we're voting for a lot of times. I know a lot of people who vote Republican that live on welfare, and that doesn't sound stupid to anybody to read a paper, because the Republicans want to do away with welfare, Social Security, and all the government assistance that these same people are living off of. I also am going to complain about people that don't like the Affordable Health Care Act. If you have insurance of your own, I don't care if it's through Social Security or through your company or if you pay for it yourself, why do you want to deny poor people the right to be covered? There's no reason in a country such as America where there's so much money. If you just add up the money that I discussed in the last two shows that has been hoarded and basically stolen from our tax coffers, that money could have done a lot of good for homeless people. The money I told you that has been denied to the homeless shelter for the past few years, that $9 million, that's nothing to people like Jeb Bush and Rick Scott, but that's years of caring for homeless people that could have been done out of that money. It's ridiculous that we are unwilling as a nation to take care of our sick, lame, and lazy. Now, they're not all sick, lame, and lazy. Some people are just down on their luck, but that's what we call them. A lot we call them the sick, lame, and the lazy. That's the negative words that we throw at them, and we're prejudiced against them, and we don't want to see them on the streets. Certain cities, instead of trying to house the homeless, they try and push them to the borders and make the next county deal with it. That's not the right way to deal with it. Sooner or later, somebody's got to take them. Look at what's going on in the Middle East with these wars and all the refugees that are going to different countries. Some of the refugees are coming here from other countries. We're having a problem with the illegal immigrants. All of this stuff is important. Now, yeah, we don't want to have to be responsible for everybody else's homeless. It's got to start here at home. But we should be able to take care of our American citizen homeless people. There's got to be a way that we can take a little from the rich and do something. We don't have to give it to the poor. We can just put a house around them. You know what I mean? Put up a building that they can sleep under so they can get out of the box. And that takes them off the street too, so that the business people don't have them hanging out in front of their businesses. There's a lot of benefits to helping the homeless. And we're going to look into that. We're going to talk a lot about it. It's a pet project of mine, let's say. I don't get involved as much as I would like to because I'm physically not able to do a lot of things. So I will talk about it a lot. I will advocate for it. And if I see a guy that holding his hand out that looks like he needs a meal, I'm going to give him money. I don't give money to the guys that are on the same street corner every day. We've all read about them in the paper, and they're abusing our compassion and making a good living off of it. But there are others out there who really do need it. And I don't care if it's because they're crazy or because they're drug addicts or whatever's keeping them out of the job world. A lot of our military with PTSD, they're ending up out there in the streets begging for money. I'm going to give them people money every time. Now, it's never a lot because I don't have a lot. But I've given my last $5 to a homeless person before. And I know darn well he could have gone out and bought alcohol or drugs with it. I hope he bought a sandwich. But bottom line is I did a good thing. I tried to do a good thing. My intentions were good. What he did with the money is on him. All I can do is what I have available to me. I can give what I have. I can give my time, I can give my thoughts, and when I have a little bit of money, I'll give my money. I won't give it to just anybody. I won't send it to charities like the World Wildlife Federation. They're not getting a dime from me. And it's not because I don't love animals. I do love animals. I just don't think it's a good charity. They waste too much of their money. I'm not going to contribute to that. There are so many things that we can do in our own communities to help people in our own communities. You have people that you know in your neighborhoods. You may not know they're poor, but there are poor there. And we need to find these people. We need to help them. We need to do more outreach. It's not just a problem for the churches. This is a problem that society needs to be taken care of. Hillary Clinton used to say it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes a village to raise a village. We're only as good as our weakest link. So if our weakest links are starving to death or dying in poverty or sick and can't get health care, that's how weak our country is. We're as weak as our weakest link. We're as weak as the worst of us. So we have to improve as a society. And that comes from being compassionate. That comes from eliminating hate, eliminating greed, giving to the needy. Something that you're going to hear me rage against a lot is I, me, mine. I don't like people with that attitude. If all you can think about is yourself and what you need and what you want, and you don't have any time to give anything to anybody else, you're pretty much a useless part of society. Hopefully when you grow up, you'll start caring about other people. People that get into relationships that have that type of attitude don't do well in the relationship. I think I mentioned it when we were talking about religion, but in order for a good religion, for a good relationship to work, both people have to care about the other one's wants and needs as much as they do their own. Now, if you spend all your time taking care of your partner's wants and needs, and they spend all their time taking care of your wants and needs, everybody's happy, and that's a really good, policy. It works out real good for everybody. But if one person's not doing their job, the whole thing falls apart. And that's what's going on in our society today. Too many of us are not participating. We're not being involved. We expect somebody else to go out and vote. We expect somebody else to help the homeless. We expect somebody else to pay for health care for the poor. There was a person, I believe it was a Stephen Colbert show. It might have been the Daily Show. They're both great shows. But they did an interview with a politician. I don't remember his name. I wish I did because I'd really like to slap him around with this. But he was being interviewed, and he said that he thought that we should totally eliminate welfare and Social Security in this country, that poor people do not need the government's help, and that if we were to eliminate welfare, that the general public, you and I, and the rich people, those trickle-down economic guys, they would take care of the poor people. And we don't need the government's help. Rich people are going to do enough to take care of the poor, the sick, the lame, and the lazy, and the senior citizens. We can count on all our rich folks like Reuben and Buffett and these other guys that we've been, Rick Scott, he's going to take great care of us because as soon as he gets out of the done seeking office, he's going back into private business, just like these guys we read about. And he's going to go back to making money off of the laws he changed while he was here in Florida. Don't think he's not. He didn't spend $200 million of his own money to become governor to make $180,000 a year. Well, that's all I have for you for tonight's show. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're enjoying the new graphics. Lou's done a lot of work on the show. Last week's graphics to this week's graphics have improved because Lou had more time to work on it this week. And hopefully it's just going to keep improving. Lou keeps getting ideas and we just put it into place. One thing I don't know if you noticed, I'm not staring at a monitor anymore. Well, yeah, I am, but it's over there. So, we're doing things, trying to get a little more professional, put the monitor where it belongs so that I can read off of it like, David Letterman and everybody else on TV does without having to look away from the camera. I hope that's making the show a little bit better. I'm trying to get rid of the does in my speech. That's something that's going to take time. I'm not a professional at this. I've never taken classes. I hope you bear with me through that, and I hope to get better. But it's going to take practice, and it's going to take a little bit of patience on your part. But you see, we're working hard here. We're trying to put together a good production. We're constantly coming up with new ideas, and I can't say it enough. We're open to all of your ideas. Anybody that wants to be a part of the show or has an idea for this show, please communicate with us. Post it on my personal page, post it on Real Talk Radio. Eventually we're going to have Real Talk TV. It's going to switch over. We're going to keep the old page long enough for everybody to switch over so we don't lose the viewers that we have now. But we do got to get it updated because I'm saying one thing and we're on another. And some people are having a hard time finding us. So we're working all the little bugs out. And as you see, it's getting a little bit better each week. So stick with us, share it with friends, ask your friends to share it. The more people that watch, the better chance we have of actually doing something and getting something accomplished as a people. So thank you all for tuning in. Again, I want to plug Louis Kennedy Studios. He's making all this good stuff happen. I'm just doing the same thing I've been doing, sitting here talking, and all the good changes that are going on and all the hard work behind the scenes. That's all Louis Kennedy, folks. Thank him, and I thank you for watching. We thank you for watching. I hope you continue to tune in and share us with your friends. Until next time, this is Stitch saying goodnight, America.